What's going on, you guys? Slim here with a new video today, and yes, we are here to talk about how to side deck in order to beat ADAMANCIPATOR, aka the rock deck. If you guys are new here, consider subscribing, hit that notification bell. You guys will be notified whenever I upload. You'll also be notified when I go stream over on Twitch. I'm going to have a lot more streams coming again. I took a little break, but now we're back, so hopefully you guys do come over. We always have a great time over there. This will be something that we'll be discussing over on Twitch as well, as how we're going to make our side deck strategy for this format. And I know a lot of people say, okay, all we have is an online format. How are you supposed to base anything? Well, there's a lot of data that we can collect. PPG has a lot of data. The luxury card gaming tournaments have a lot of data, and I know a lot of people don't take those seriously, but I think you should. You should realize that, you know, it is clear that the rock deck, Eldritch, all those decks are the #1 decks, or the most played decks. People play them everywhere, and it's important to have a really good side deck for countering the deck. So of course down here I just have some really basic stuff. I just have all that all the rock guys basically, because there was something I wanted to talk about. There was a card in here I was going to include, but then I realized, like, I'm not really sure how to feel about it. So you guys can let me know in the comments if you think it should have been included. But we're going to talk about, like, just like kind of, you know, what the deck does and what our side deck strategy should be against it. So depending on what deck you're playing, I don't know if you yourself are playing the rock deck, or if you're playing Eldritch, if you're playing Mech Knight Invoke like I am, or if you're playing any other kind of deck, you have to ask yourself, okay, is any of the stuff here, is anything main deck worthy? So the only card I've seen most people that are main decking is actually Dark Ruler No More. So Dark Ruler No More I really like, because this card just turns off the entire board. And what you do is, your goal is to turn off the board and break it, and you can't OTK because of, you know, they can't take any damage, but the whole point is that you break the board and then you set it up so they can't play. So you have to make sure you're playing a deck that can do just that, because even if you break the board, if all you do is break the board and you set up a suboptimal board, they can come back. And that is one thing that I think that people need to realize. You need to be able to break the board with Dark Ruler No More, and then you need to be able to capitalize on that and establish your own board, and I think that's really important. One thing I noticed about Dark Ruler No More was that it was a card that some people actually began to main deck even in the rock deck, because you need it for the mirror match. It's not that good against Eldritch, obviously, but it's really good against the mirror match, because, you know, they're setting up multiple synchros, you know, XYZs, all that stuff. They could be setting up these. This is important too. Like, you need to be able to counter this. You need, if they're playing this, you need to be able to counter all this stuff. So you turn off their board. They could have a Borreload Savage. They could have an Appaloosa. You need to be able to just wipe that whole board. And the best way to wipe that board, in my opinion, is Dark Ruler No More. But like I said, make sure if you're side decking this card or main decking this card, that you make sure that you set up and establish a board yourself. The beauty of this is they can't use any of their negates on board, so that's super important. So I really do like that. So I wanted to start with Dark Ruler No More just because it was the only card on this list that basically is main deck worthy. Next, of course, we've got Sphere Mode. So Sphere Mode's pretty simple. They set up a board of multiple negates, you just break 3 of them. That Sphere Mode's been around a long time. We know how this works. It does eat up your normal summon, which is fine if your deck can support it. Luckily for decks like Mech Knight Invoked, you could just Sphere Mode them, and then you could just, you know, you could Sphere Mode, set up a column, and start doing things. Not every deck can do that, so that could be a problem. You have to make sure you do get rid of the Sphere Mode, though, because the Sphere Mode, unfortunately, like, it's just something like, even if you don't get rid of it, it'll still come back to your side, which is fine. You can just do stuff with it at that point, but you want to make sure you get it off the board, because the whole goal is when you Sphere Mode them, you pretty much want to just OTK them at that point, and I think if your deck can do that, that's really important. Like I said, as long as your normal summon is not that important, Sphere Mode's really strong. You can also throw Lava Golem in there, but I like Sphere Mode. It eats 3 cards. Lava Golem only eats 2, but sometimes, you know, it really depends on the deck, but I think when this rock deck goes full ham, they set up more than 3 negates, so being able to have that is really important. You know, the boards of like Appaloosa or IP, Appaloosa, and like I said, Appaloosa, IP Masquerena, if they have any of these guys on board, Borreload Savage, all that stuff, just being able to break that for just a single summon is really nice. So I like this card a lot. I think this card's very versatile against that deck. It's just, I feel it's necessary, this format, against this particular deck. You could also argue for Nibiru. Now, the reason why Nibiru is not on here is because of how easily this deck plays around Nibiru. I don't know if you guys know this, but the rock deck basically plays with Nibiru and against Nibiru and around Nibiru, because they are a rock deck and earth deck themselves. What they do is, you do give them the token, they just keep going. So even if you rock them at the right point, they can keep going. So that's one thing you have to be aware of. I didn't include it on this list because most people would, you know, if they have it in the rock deck, it's either in the main or side, but you can play it if you want. I think that Sphere Mode just at least clears the problems. The thing is, I want to clear the problem and not give them anything. You do this during your turn. You know, you Sphere Mode them, you break their board, and then you just start. Once you've broken the board, you just OTK them, or you set up a board again like Dark Ruler No More that they cannot break. So I think that's really important. So had to include Sphere Mode. Next, I've got the Artifact Scythe, of course, with the Sanctum. So this is pretty straightforward. I don't know that many decks that are main decking this. I remember the only deck that was main decking this at one point was Shaddoll Invoked. I don't know if they're still playing this. They would play this, and they would have this alongside Scythe, and the beauty is you could just trigger this. Having this in Windows is really strong, obviously. But for most people that would be side decking this card, all you have to do is just establish it. If you're playing cards like Trap Trick or stuff like that, to play multiple copies of Sanctum, that's important too, to include those. But Sanctum by itself will summon Scythe, and if they can't get into their extra deck, it's very strong. I think that's one thing that people need to realize, is that by themselves, they're just a bunch of little, like, tuner monsters that just flip cards. And sure, they can summon a bunch of cards, but if they can't go into their extra deck, you just break their board every time. So I think it's really important to play stunny cards like Scythe that just say, no, you can't access your extra deck for a turn, and then that gives you a whole turn to try and fight back. Usually the Scythe survives, so you're able to use it as a beat stick, or you are able to use it to link climb or do whatever you do in your deck. So I think that is important to have. Cards like Artifact Scythe, Artifact Sanctum. These cards, have been playing them for years. We play them almost every format, so I think it's just important to just mention very simple stuff. If you guys notice with this list, I kept it very concise. I didn't want to include too many cards because you could have a plethora of cards, but remember, you only have 15 cards in your side deck, so you need to make sure that you pick the right amounts. We'll talk about that at the end of the video. Next, I've got a pointer of the Red Lotus. So this is a card that everyone has seen online. This is actually a pretty hard comment to find for people who don't know, but this card's really strong. Pay 2,000, reveal a card to your opponent's hand, look at your opponent's hand, select one card, remove it from play into your opponent's next end phase. So basically, you set this up to play around your opponent's hand. You get knowledge, which is so important in this game. This card can basically be used against any deck. I think this card can be used against any deck, and it's really strong because it banishes something for the whole turn, and that for the until the opponent's next end phase. And that's pretty crazy. Being able to, you know, get that knowledge, being able to take away a key piece of their puzzle, key piece of their combo is very important. But I think the main reason why I like this card so much is the knowledge you gain. A pointer allowing to look at your opponent's hand. Yes, it's 2,000 life points, but when you're looking at your opponent's hand and actually taking away a problem and gaining knowledge, I think it's definitely worth it. Like I said, this is just a card you can use against any deck. I like it against the Rock deck because basically you can get it and you can just stop their first summon. I believe I have to look at these again. This one is like the Cyber Dragon, and then these ones are the just like the normal summon ones. Or if you control an adamant monster, you could summon this one too. But what you could do is a lot of times you could just take away their first summon, take away whatever, and then they're falling behind. So that's important. And like I said, you can play around their hand with this card, so it's super important. And lastly, I got D-Barrier. So D-Barrier, I kind of go back and forth. Here's the thing. You really have to decide with this card. I included this because you guys suggested this in the community tab when I posted this, but this is a card I wanted to talk about just for a little bit. So you have the option to call XYZ, you have the option to call Synchro, you have all those options. Here's the thing, is if you call XYZ, it does stop the Rock Searcher. If you call Synchro, it stops a lot more. I think Synchro is probably what you want to call. Some people are playing it a different way, but you know, they usually end on, you know, stuff like that. There's IP Masquerade and stuff. The problem is you can't play around the link, so that can be a problem. That's why I have it basically last on this list, because I'm not 100% sure how I would rank it, but I think it's a decent card overall. I mean, I think these other cards are better, and if I were to make a side deck like based off of this, I would definitely side triple copies of Dark Ruler No More. I would side 2 to 3 Sanctums, depending on if you're playing Trap Trick. Of course, I would also play the Scythe. Sphere mode, if your deck can support it, I think that's important too. A pointer, you know, and then you basically have your 15 cards. D-Barrier is just, like I said, I wanted to throw in there for you guys. But like I said, other cards we mentioned, we can type in Nibiru. And we could include Nibiru here as well. You know, that does help with stuff. Now, I didn't include any other hand traps because all the other hand traps are basically, you know, if you have them, you have them. If you don't, you don't. If you're main decking them, it's fine. You're rarely going to side deck cards like Ash or anything like that. That's stuff you'll mostly have like in your main deck. So that's why I didn't include it here. Other things, people have talked about cards like Gozen Match. So here's the thing with Gozen Match. I wasn't really sure how I felt about this card because, okay, yes, it locks them into one attribute. So basically, you know, you can summon all these guys, but then they're not able to go into any of the synchros or anything like that. They can go into, I believe, the rock guy that searches. They can still summon Block Dragon. So like I said, I'm not 100% sold on this card. I would have to ask you guys in the comments, have you tested Gozen Match if your deck can support it? And if you have, how has the card been? Because I actually don't know how strong this card is, because going against this deck, yes, it sounds good. You know, all they do is summon their little guys. How do they play around this? If they have a way around it, they have a way around it. But again, I think more testing needs to be done. We need to see more online events and more stuff, you know, as the online tournaments continue to spew out. But I think overall, this is a pretty concise list of stuff that can, you know, touch, that can go against the deck, that can stop the deck. And especially when you're side decking, like I said, you only have 15 slots. Do not dedicate all 15 slots to the rock deck. You have to account for Eldritch, which will be our next episode. You have to account for all those other decks. So make sure that you don't just limit it to the rock deck, but this will just give you guys a pretty simple way to side deck. Pick from these cards, add any cards, you know, in the comments below, let me know cards I missed. I'm sure I missed plenty of them. I just wanted to talk about some of the cards that you guys mentioned, and I wanted to add a few of my own. I think this is a pretty good list, though, for starting out. Like I said, hand traps outside of Nibiru didn't make this list just because they're usually in your main deck, and they're not really something you side deck, but you guys already know what hand traps are good this format. We talk about it almost every video, but yeah. I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. We'll be doing our next episode on Eldritch. We'll cover Eldritch Invoked. We'll cover Pure Eldritch. We'll cover Eldritch Stun. We'll cover the new Synchro build that just popped up. We'll cover all those builds because there are a lot of cards that I feel can also be used against Eldritch that'll also cover the rock deck and also be able to cover any other decks you might face in the meta. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Let me know in the comments below any card, any monsters, or any stuff that I missed, and we'll talk about it more in the comments. And like I said, this is how to side deck against the rock deck, and hopefully it helped you guys out. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for watching.